So far we've talked about how I decided to move to the Netherlands, the plans that I made to do so, and in the last episode, I told you how I found what seemed to me to be the ideal house in the Netherlands. So now that we've done that, it's time to sell the house in the US. Once back from the Netherlands scouting trip, I turned my immediate attention to preparing my house for the market. Realtors like a house to be as empty as possible. This is kind of a challenge when you still live in the house and haven't actually begun paring back your belongings. I also had to refinish the basement ceiling. There was a small issue with a former mice family that had moved in by the ceiling heat vent. In their zeal to build the ultimate nest next to the vent, they had eaten a hole through a couple of ceiling tiles. I'd been waiting to replace that portion of the ceiling until the mice had been dealt with. Meanwhile, I had closed the hole with black duct tape. Beyond that, there were a lot of little things to do, like bits of trim I never got around to replacing, trimming some bushes, starting to sell off stuff that'd been sitting around forever. It's remarkable how quickly we can fill our houses with junk. We considered pushing back the initial list date, but I wanted to get it on the market and sold as quickly as possible. I needed to have the proceeds by the end of June, so we targeted late April as the list date. We started with an open house. The cats and I sat in the car down the street and watched the multiple families that came and went. There were some potentially interested parties, and within a couple days I had the first offer. The problem was the offer was $40,000 below my list price. Frankly, I was quite insulted. They wanted to do a complete overhaul of the house that I had already overhauled. I told them to come back with a more serious offer, which they never did. The cats and I spent quite a bit of time going back and forth between the house and the car as viewing after viewing came through. The worst were the realtors who neglected to lock the doors, turn off the lights, and sometimes left the toilet seats up, which is a problem because my weird cats like playing in the water in the toilet. Some viewings reported interest in the property. Some said the price was just right, but the bedrooms were too small. Others said the price was too high and it was dated, which is an odd response given that I had just remodeled everything but the flooring. I finally received another offer that came in $20,000 below my asking price, claiming that they had viewed similar properties around that price that were more updated. Again, not sure where they're coming up with that. Efforts to negotiate with them were completely unsuccessful, and at this point, I was starting to get frustrated. I made my purchase in the Netherlands based on the amount I expected to get from the sale of the house. Now I was getting feedback that we had overestimated the price. In an effort to address the comments, I did some further work on the house. With some of the remaining trim, I flipped my office and the guest bedroom upstairs, hoping to get rid of the comments about the bedrooms being too small, since my office was the largest room upstairs. And by the way, the bedrooms were the average size for any house of that era. One of the most memorable viewings was a goth realtor with a young couple. I have never seen a goth realtor before. They didn't spend very much time in the house, and I remarked to my realtor how annoying it was to drop everything for a viewing that obviously wasn't serious. Imagine my surprise when they put in an offer late that night. An offer, in fact, that was quite reasonable. The realtor was young and kind of a pain for my realtor to work with, but we made the best of it. They waited until the last minute to have the inspection done, and then the couple freaked out because there were some roots in the sewer line, something all the houses on my street deal with, and is kind of expected when you have large mature trees in the front yard. Being young and having a young realtor, the couple didn't understand this and panicked, thinking they were going to have to replace the entire sewer line. They demanded we renegotiate. My realtor reassured them that no, just scope the line once a year and it's fine. We provided a reassuring statement from my sewer guy, but the buyers walked away when I said I would not come down in price. So back on the market the house went, now showing that it went back on because the buyers didn't like the results of the inspection. This makes it a lot harder to sell a house. Buyers are cautious when they see something like that. And at this point, we were getting down to the wire to have it sold in time for the June deadline, given that the house had now been on the market for a month. During this time, we had also dropped the price a couple of times and still no reasonable offers. My realtor suggested further price drops to try and sell it fast, being keenly aware of my tight time frame. But I had a better idea. The main feedback was that the house was dated compared to similar houses. Looking online, I noticed everyone these days has wood floors. Now, I also had wood floors under the carpet upstairs. So I came up with the brilliant idea to remove some of the carpet and show what lovely wood floors they were. It was decided that this should happen in the dining room. I pulled up one corner just to check and found the floor to be quite nice. The next morning, I ripped up the whole chunk of carpet, and that's when I discovered the giant water stain in one corner. Uh-oh. To put the carpet back would require stretching it. The only other option was to hire somebody to do the entire upstairs. And that is how I found James and the giant floor sander. And yes, that's actually the name of his business. James came with very good reviews and just happened to be available the next week to do the job. Meanwhile, my Dutch realtor negotiated with the sellers to push the date back to the very beginning of August. That allowed me to pull the house off the market for 2 weeks, completely empty the upstairs, and have the floors redone. If you want a way to ensure you clean out your house and downsize quickly, have your floors refinished. The floors, by the way, turned out amazing, and had I known it was that easy to redo them, I would have done it quite a few years ago. Naturally, one day before we were set to relist the house, we got an offer from someone that had been through the night right before I'd pulled the house off the market. The offer was kind of reasonable, but we pushed them to view the house with the overhaul and make a fresh offer. Meanwhile, we relisted, and the cats and I went back and forth between the house and the van as more people came through. Things were looking promising when multiple viewings one day said they had strong interest. My realtor and I were fully anticipating a bidding war at that point, so you can imagine my disappointment when all of them failed to make an offer. That's when the previous offer finally responded. They would come through for a viewing the next day and then make a new offer. They spent close to an hour viewing the house, the longest anyone had been in it, and came back with a very acceptable offer. Now, at this point, you'd think all was finally well after 2 months on the market, but no. This was just the beginning of the most insane part of my immigration experience.